So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you again so much for being here. My name is Stacy Bewley, and I am the ECE Community Relations Supervisor for JCPS. So I do a lot of community outreach, parent programming. I do our social media, so follow us on Facebook. I share some information there about our workshops and from our community partners. And I work a lot with parents, and that is one of my favorite things to do. So I work a lot with parents on advocacy skills and just navigating this special education process because it's multi-layered. I am a mom of a student with a disability, so here's my guy on the left. When I started my journey into special education, teaching was my second career. So he had been diagnosed with autism about 2 years at that point, and the second picture is finishing my last degree in 2020. So he's all grown up now. But I know what it's like to be on both sides of that table. So I welcome your input, and you are so important to the success of your student. So thank you again for being here. I'm joined tonight by Trisha Bronger, and I will let her tell you about herself.
Hi, good evening. This is Trisha Bronger, and I am the director of Greater Louisville Education Cooperative. So we support families in the way of supporting administrators and teachers to learn about and support effective instruction, the policies, regulations, really thinking about kind of the whole child and how we can support success. We're funded by Kentucky Department of Education, and we serve specifically statewide. And then regionally, we support Jefferson County Public Schools with their professional development. We host, coach, and provide resources, as well as Kentucky School for the Blind, located here in Louisville. So we're a resource for the district, families, as well as administrators, teachers, paraprofessionals, et cetera, that are serving students in the best way possible. So thanks for letting me join, Stacy.
I'm so grateful for you lending your expertise to our evening. So our objectives for this session, just like your students within their classroom should have a learning target. You may have heard that language. So our objectives for this session are just to understand the referral process for ECE, and to explain the elements of the individual education program, that IEP. We know that special education is instruction that is specially designed to meet the unique needs of children who have disabilities. Special education and related services are provided in public schools at no cost to parents, and that comes from our federal law surrounding special education.
And that it's a nice warm opportunity to have alphabet soup. So if there's anything that we have abbreviations or something new, we want to make sure we have those questions on our website, and I'll include that later. We have a dictionary that has those acronyms and things like that. And if there's something not on there that you're looking for, we'll add it to it. But it's got definitions, etc. So when she said the federal law, the IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act, and it's to support that free, appropriate public education. And we know public education is free. And I think the best thing that always, when I talk with families, is it appropriate? Is it meeting the needs of your child or children in the school? And we want to make sure that you know that there are resources in the district for parents ages 3 through 21. The nice thing about Jefferson County, and as an observer, not all districts continue to educate once a child turns 21, let's say in September, and then they're exiting. But Jefferson County, as long as they're 21 through, they complete that last year. And I think that's good transition to know up front.
Perfect. The acronyms were one of the most overwhelming pieces for me as a mama and, of course, as a new teacher as well. So we want to talk about what those acronyms are, and we'll break several of those down. So that first acronym, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, and that is the federal law, again, that guides our practice to ensure that all children with disabilities have the free, appropriate public education that Tricia was talking about, and to ensure that the rights of children with disabilities and their parents are protected, and their parents. So we'll talk about if you've been to a ARC meeting, you've received a copy of your procedural safeguards. Those are your parent rights. And we'll talk about some of those as we go along as well.
One thing that we talk about the free appropriate public education is when you accept services, we want to make sure that it's for the whole child. So you're looking at specially designed instruction in the classroom, but also related services. And those related services are to support potentially physical therapy, occupational therapy. So the special education is services and education. The related services actually helps kind of the whole child access those services. So it potentially could be parent education. It could be orientation and mobility if I have a visual impairment. It could look at counseling as a related services if I need it. The school can access that resource, so you're not having to go outside to a private provider.
So when we talk about, you hear about a child with a disability. So what does that mean under the IDEA? And it just means a child who has been evaluated as having a disability and who by reason thereof needs special education and related services. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through the referral process. I chose this picture and I love it so much because if I asked you to find the child with a disability, I think you'd be hard pressed to do that from this picture. But there could be 10 to 15% of that classroom with a disability, and they're just not all visible. You know, we could have a child with a learning disability or attention deficit disorder, and it's just hard to pick out. So a child with a disability, I just want you to know that it could be anyone. It looks like a lot of different things. No set picture of a child with a disability.
Once the referral, and anyone can refer a student with a disability if they suspect there needs to be some resources beyond what they're receiving already in the general education classroom. We want to make sure that they are receiving what all students are receiving as far as instruction and access and resources and extracurricular, but sometimes students need a little bit more. And that is where the IEP comes in. So it's not a plan. I want to make, that's one of my little pet peeves. It is a program. It is looking at access to everything for that child, educationally, extracurricular, et cetera. And I think that the love I have for that when I was a teacher with students with disability is when I had a student with an IEP, that helped me really plan for the individual needs of a child. So I had standards. I wanted to see how the IEP would help me organize and make sure that I was meeting the student's need. It's a written information. The state does have a template, but it only guides resources. So every time that there is the development, there is a drafting stage where I would pull in information. I would ask the parents, I would ask others, teachers or counselors or anybody who knew that child. The families may have some private providers or resources, and you as a parent and guardian are the most important person, I think, as special educator, is because you know your child best. And when you bring those gifts and strengths to the table, that's going to help really build on the strengths, and then we can focus on improvement areas. So this IEP is written. It is written with the idea to support the individual needs for what can we accomplish in that IEP, life of an IEP, I always call it, like that calendar. It's not a calendar year or academic year. So if we're developing right now in January, what can we accomplish by next January that we're looking for goals, supports, etc. So it's really a journey to connect the dots, where the child is, what's the present level, where can we think about goals, what do we need to think about the strengths of the child, and what are some things that we can do together as a team that comes together to think about those successes.
I love that you brought that up, Trisha, about the strengths, because one of the things that I talk to parents about all the time when we're talking about getting ready for that ARC meeting, not only do I encourage them to bullet down a list of their concerns, but because you are the experts on your child, you tell us what are the strengths and what are the areas of growth, what works for you at home. It may not always mirror what's going to work in the classroom because it's a completely different environment, but it's so important to have that knowledge. So I love that you brought that up. Here are eligibility categories, and you have those in your handouts. I won't read all those to you.
I think the most important thing that I came to once I learned more about special education is this eligibility category is just a green light to support services. So while it's important for the eligibility, it's really about how does that area really support where we're going to head with that child. So every child with autism, like she said, in that picture, you can't pinpoint which child because on a continuum, everybody has those individual needs, traits, and strengths. So eligibility helps support getting services, because sometimes I'll get a question from a parent like, why do I have to have a label? Well, it's really not a label. It is an important area of how is the learning being impacted. It gets us started with where to head as a team, looking at that IEP, and then we can think about the whole child in that area.
Here's a roadmap through our process. So we, of course, begin with the referral. And like Trisha said, anyone can make a referral, a child care provider, a mental health provider, pediatrician's office, grandparent, whomever can make a referral if they're concerned about a student. And so once that referral is made and consent is given to conduct an evaluation, the evaluation will take place. We're going to stop and expand on these as we go, but I'll just take you on a quick overview of where we're headed tonight. So the evaluation will take place, and then another meeting will be held, and they will then discuss eligibility. At that meeting, consent will be requested a second time. So the parent gives consent for the evaluation to take place. And then if the student is eligible for services, the parent has to give consent a second time for services to be provided. So I think that speaks to the importance of parents and families within the ARC committee and the decision-making process. Once eligibility is determined, we go into IEP planning. We'll talk about least restrictive environment. There's a new acronym, LRE. Implement and progress monitoring, implementation and progress monitoring. And then we will review and reevaluate every 3 years. And again, we're going to expand on these points as we go along, but there's the quick overview of where we're headed.
So like we talked about referral, a written request for a child to be individually tested. And that's where you come in order to be a partner to say, these are things I've noticed, you agree. This should not be a total shock if someone referred a child and it wasn't you. This would have been after a school or a department or a team has worked with your child or children, and they have tried interventions that are, shown to be effective. So they've had instruction, they've done their best, they've been looking at the data, because it's important to know what worked and what didn't so that we don't repeat something that wasn't working for that particular individual. And then that request, that each school district has a policy. Each school has a process for this referral, and there should be a point person that could help you with this referral to evaluate. They would ask you, what areas are you concerned about if it was you referring? Or if they're apart, they would have maybe said at a parent-teacher conference, we've been working in this area, this child's, your student is doing really well with this piece, but here's an area of growth. I've continued to do this. It hasn't worked to the best of its ability, and there may need to be some more specially designed instruction needed. And that may be where you can refer a child to have those evaluation and really look at the whole child and see where we could go from there so that your child is successful in the classroom.
Once that referral has been made, the evaluation will then take place. And so that's really a process of gathering information about the needs and the abilities. I think it's important to point out that no single test is going to determine eligibility. A lot of there's going to be what we call triangulation of data, just taking data from different places and people. And so that could look like an individual test administered by a diagnostician, review of the school records, any sort of behavioral observations, interviews with parents and teachers and others who may have a vested interest or information about a student, and then rating scales. So that's going to be part of the process of an evaluation.
And at that meeting, you'll have the opportunity to understand what areas for that evaluation. So there'll be an evaluation plan that you'll be a part of to help develop that. And then once all of that evaluation is looked at within 90 school days, at least at minimum, because you've got to interview, gather information, look at that information, and then you say, does this indicate a child may be eligible for special education? And just because they're eligible doesn't mean it's something that adversely affects them in the classroom. Like, I am legally blind without my glasses, but because I wear my glasses or contacts, I don't have to have other special things besides the glasses, and it doesn't adversely affect me unless I can't find them. So it's a three-pronged look. It's, are they eligible? How does that impact that child? And does it really impact them in the learning setting? I think the difference between accommodations, I know that's a new word that I'm bringing up here, but it's a matter of eligibility. Does that child need instruction from a certified teacher, et cetera? And that would be the biggest difference to know. I may have a disability. If it impacts me enough, that would be the decision of you and the rest of the committee to come to that decision. It's not one person making that decision.
Once eligibility has been determined and consent provided again for services, at that point, the individualized education program is developed. So that is, again, a written statement of the program designed to meet their needs to address those adverse impacts, to look at the picture of the whole child. What does the very first part of the IEP is going to be the present level summary, and that present level should tell a story and paint a picture of what that student looks like at school and what are they really good at and where are their struggles and what are we doing to help them address those needs and reach their goals that are also part of the program and plan. Okay.
So that IEP is something that is confidential. Only the persons who need access to that information of the programming and support for the student who is eligible for special education. The purpose is to look at that picture that you've painted and that journey that Stacy shared and really think about which area do we want to prioritize? What do you as a parent want to think about? We want to focus on this part first. Because remember, an IEP is from, if we had our meeting today, it would last till next January at minimum. That doesn't mean you can't meet ahead of time and make changes in between, but the goals are what you're going to be a part of to really think about where we're headed. Do you want to look at goals that support increased reading comprehension or fluency, or do we want to, basic math? Where are the goals for the student? And it might even be behavior, where you want to increase more desirable behaviors in that area. And then from the goals, we think about outline that services that who is going to implement that. Is it going to be a counselor? Is it going to be the teacher? Is in what area? How often? And so those goals will be based on that present level of where the child is. And then we always want to look, you as a parent would always be looking for data because you want to know where are they now. And then as you're going through the IEP, if we don't have that data up front, we don't know if there's been growth. We don't know if it's working, or if there's no data, we don't know if it hasn't worked. And so we want to be very clear to make sure that you understand as a member, to make sure that you're asking about that data and really thinking about the services that will help support growth. What is that added value for your child?
So who develops the IEP? That's an important question, I think, right? So who's invited to the table? And the IEP, it may be drafted and should be drafted prior to a meeting being held. But it is developed, reviewed, and revised by that group of people called the Admissions Release Committee, or the ARC, as you will hear it referred to. Okay, you as the parent are a really critical part of that ARC committee. So the parent is always going to be invited. You're going to be given 7 days notice. Okay, you can choose sometimes to waive your 7 days notice. If you would like to have a meeting and you think it needs to happen sooner, you can waive that notice, but you are going to be provided 7 days notice. The student, when it's appropriate, I've seen that happen as early as elementary school, and and then carry on, of course, through high school, depending on the student and their capacity to sit and attend to the meeting. Tricia, did you have something to add to that?
Well, I was just thinking, I always, even if it was just a little part of it where, the student was there, we're here meeting, and then they could even offer their strengths, things that they think would help them. I think having their student voice is really critical.
Me too. Even our littles, even our, elementary school age students, it's important. This whole meeting is happening because of you and to help you. And so I think it's empowering for them and important. There's going to be a regular education teacher present, a special education teacher present. The district representative, that just means someone to chair the meeting, to take the notes and to make sure that all the components of the meeting that should be covered are covered. Related service personnel as appropriate. That could be your speech therapist, occupational therapist, mental health practitioner, and then others as requested. That could be, maybe that's your outside provider for counseling that you as the parent or guardian has invited to your meeting, because you can invite whomever might have additional information that's important, or someone who might be a support to you, because it is overwhelming to sit at that ARC committee table sometimes.
Sometimes, as a special education teacher too, I would ask the student for information if the parent didn't either want the child there early on, or they were going to miss something that they're really excited about and didn't want to sit in the meeting. So I always made sure that that student's voice was part of it. Others as requested too. Sometimes I've had, like, if someone was tutoring the child after school, they had a lot of information that was helpful for the committee to say, this works well. Or even give them some ideas of how they could continue, if that was important, to continue that after school care. The components of the IEP, Stacy talked about that present level. That's where, what the student's doing well, what is the data, what's going on right now in the meeting, so that we can kind of work towards it. That annual goal is like, if we had our meeting today and then next January, this is what we're working for, the goal and the objectives. We determine the special education services, which is typically instruction. What are we working on so that we increase the capacity for the child? Always thinking about transition, even when they're little, but there is that federal law that Stacy mentioned earlier, that we want to make sure that we're thinking about post-secondary, independent living. Where do you see your child after elementary, middle, or high school? Because we're not preparing this. The IEP doesn't just think about, while it's just for this year. We always have, where do we want to go independently after school? What do we need to do each year to make that goal? And we're not in elementary school just to make it to middle school or just to make it to high school. And sometimes, everybody's just right in front of what are we doing tomorrow, but really thinking about that whole child. Transition goals help if a child's interested in a particular area. They're as they age and take electives in school, as they grow, they may want to go to a specific school that offers a medical background school, or firefighting, or some kind of academy that lets them get information. If they have a specific transition goal of something like a family business or something that you have in there, what are some skills that will help that transition for the school? Related services is something that you would not have unless you had an IEP. So a child has an IEP, is getting special education supports, then the related services, it would be helpful if we had this too. So that could be that physical therapy to help with, or maybe a student has low tone, needs to develop strength and stamina to work through that. It's related to the area of eligibility that's going to help that child execute success in the IEP. The least restrictive environment, or the LRE is what we say, is where is it best for the student to learn? And is that in a small group? Is it in a large group? And you would have that discussion of where should the child be having these extra supports beyond a typical child in school. Instruction is critical in an IEP, but sometimes a child might need accommodations. Now, assessment accommodations, like if there's a high stake, we want to make sure that the child has time in order to provide what they know about information. We want to make sure that accommodations allow access. So maybe I need I have difficulty writing or print, so I may have voice to text as information. I may need a time and a half, but you would want to have that conversation with the committee so that the accommodations are something that are reasonable and doesn't prolong something. Like if I have trouble with timelines and you give me more time, I'm probably going to not be as successful because I procrastinate, I need more time, and then you give me more time, I may not ever get to the end. So thinking about a plan or a process. So let's say something's due in 2 weeks for an older student. The teacher might have a checklist. You have a title and a theme or a topic sentence, and that's due first, and then someone checks it. So there's a checklist to kind of help me stay focused on a long-term project. Would help with accommodations. And then the details talk about when is it going to happen? Is it going to be every day? Is it going to be twice weekly? Is it going to be 30 minutes? Is it going to be 45 minutes? What, where, and how really comes after what needs to be done, because there is research about what strategies work best and have the best results. And sometimes there is time. It's like, let's say we're going to do this one repeated reading for fluency. Let's say I'm a slow reader. I'm not able to articulate the reading or read out loud. So repeated reading, it says I must have at least four times a week, 20 minutes. And if I'm only going to get that twice a week, that's probably not going to help my rate of improvement because I'm not doing it at the rate that it says I'm going to need. So when, where, and how will be discussion from each member, and then you would have that on the IEP so that you can follow. You would know when the child's getting services, you'll know when it's provided, how often, who's doing it. And then the implementation and progress monitoring is you want to monitor how well the student's doing. And so that after that implementation, the progress monitoring is, maybe every 2 weeks or et cetera, but you'll get a report of progress every grading period. But also there's parent portal in Infinite Campus where you can access information about your child's progress in classes, and it could help conversations later about how your child's doing in class.
Now, when Tricia talked about the data that should be collected, and that's going to help us determine whether whatever intervention or whatever specially designed instruction we're providing to help a student meet their goal academically or behaviorally, that data, that progress monitoring lets us know if what we're doing is working. If it's not working, we may need to either adjust how we are implementing that or try a different strategy altogether. So the data and the progress monitoring are so important for the whole picture. So with the present levels of functioning, again, it's going to talk about, it should capture the student's strengths and weaknesses, what helps that child learn, what limits or interferes with the child learning. And again, I think it's just so important. I did this, I started writing a beginning of the year letter when my son was in elementary school. I started writing a beginning of the year letter, and I would just introduce him to his new teacher or teachers as we progressed into middle school and high school. He would be mortified if he if he knew that I still did that in high school, but I did. And within that letter, I would talk about, just that, those strengths and those, areas of growth or weaknesses, however you want to phrase that. Because again, your input is really valuable. What helps them learn? Are they a hands-on learner? Do they need visual models? Do they need that chunking of information? What gets in the way of their learning, right? And then we're going to look at objective data from the current evaluations of the child. And we're going to look at, again, how that disability or eligibility affects their ability to be involved and progress in the general curriculum. So how much are they included with their non-disabled peers? What does that look like in their present level of functioning?
So we talked about, life after school. And so at minimum, when a child is 8th grade or age 14, we want to make sure that that is a requirement in the IEP. There's also interest inventories or career opportunities where they can say what they like or what they plan to do in the future, where the counselor or maybe a teacher that they have a good relationship with, and they would use that information for an individualized learning plan or ILP. Every child in a school has an ILP, not just those with disabilities, but it's important to bring that information in to talk about strengths and needs and goals that they wish after school. It's also really looking at post-secondary goals of if what I want to do, if I want to be a hairdresser or a WWF wrestler. What are things that child is going to need to know and be able to do in order to meet those goals, and help them, coach them to meet their ultimate dream job, if you will, or dream life. What do they want in their life, and who they want in their life, and then what can we all do as a team to help support that child reach the goals?
The IEP is going to contain, again, annual goals and objectives. So where's my child heading this year? If we had a meeting today on January 25th, we would have to meet again no later than January 24th of 2024. So that's going to be the life of that IEP. So where are they heading this year? What are they working on academically and in terms of their functional development? How are they doing school? How are they interacting with others? And what are our big focal points for the year? Those goals are going to be written in measurable terms, and that's where that data collection comes in as well.
So the special education services are what will help reach those goals. Looking at the instruction is what the teacher does. What specially designed is going to meet the unique needs of a child that is eligible and has a disability. And it's the education that is individual. What does this student or your child need that is specific to what Stacy will need in order to be successful? Or what Trisha is going to need, or Jake. And so it's really looking at that specific child and really, what do I need to do instructionally as a teacher to make sure that those needs are met? So special education services is instruction specially designed to meet the needs based on their goals and objectives.
Specially designed instruction, I think, is and you'll see this on the IEP document as SDI. So specially designed instruction, that is the heart of special education. It's what teachers do to instruct, to assess, to reteach, regroup. We're going to instruct, assess, collect data. How well did the instruction help the student, meet the goal or master the content? So if need be, we're going to reteach that. We use that assessment data to inform what's next within the classroom. So some examples are explicit instruction, and that's really just like it sounds. It's explicit. It could be modeling of a process or an idea. It's going to be direct instruction in maybe using a graphic organizer. Or Trisha, did you want to add to that? I saw your microphone pop up.
Oh no, I was just going along with the examples too, because I think the modeling piece is kind of like, I do it as a model, you do it, or is the ultimate goal. So it's I do it, and then we can do it together, and then that student can be independent. And then some students need lots of practice. So I may do it, but then I may do it again, and then show another example, and then do it again. And then the student has practiced not just one time, but 2 or 3 times. And then we might practice again tomorrow, because that spaced practice will help create some rituals, routines, and have like more opportunity to pull information if they've had more practice.
We can pre-teach a vocabulary if we're going in, even if it's a literature lesson. And I know that something in a reading passage is going to be confusing to my students. I could pre-teach that vocabulary and give them a leg up in helping them to comprehend what we're reading. It's really important in specific content areas like science and social studies, to math, to pre-teach that vocabulary. We could teach strategy instruction. What comes next? If I'm supposed to write a 5-paragraph essay, when I was in the classroom, I would have kids who that was overwhelming to them, right? But when we broke it down into, well, here's what goes in that first paragraph. Let's do that. Let's do that today. Or let's do a graphic organizer and just think about what might go in that first paragraph. And we'll call that done for today and come back to it. So that's that strategy instruction that over time, as you practice and have the repetition, they're able then to retrieve that more quickly and a 5-paragraph, I know exactly what to do now, right? Because we've practiced over and over with that, with those intentionality in the classroom. And then of course using mnemonics to help you remember the order of steps. Like, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally is the one that comes to mind. I'm sure there are countless others that would help students again access their content knowledge.
And the mnemonics is kind of a shortcut to really think about a retrieval, so that they can remember what comes next or what that process is. And so a strategy and those mnemonics are really meant, can the child be independent with that? So when you're not around as a parent, or I'm not around as a teacher, can they draw upon it and be successful independently with this strategy? And that's the whole goal, is so that they can access it independently later.
Supplementary aids and services, you'll also see this on that IEP document. So if SDI is what the teacher does, supplementary aids and services, that's what the student needs in order to learn. Things like extended time. And again, that's going to be really spelled out in the IEP document. They might need prompting, and that prompting can be That could be a visual prompt, like a visual schedule. It could be a hand signal. It could be, I've had students where I would they didn't want that direct, go over to the desk and prompt to complete. They didn't want that. I'm thinking of one student in particular, and but he needed the prompts to stay on task and to maintain focus to complete work. We had a card system, and I would hold up a certain color of an index card, and that was his prompt. It was a visual prompt, and we did that in a way that he was able to articulate that worked for him. It might be a reader. It might be large print materials for our students with visual impairments, or reinforcement behavior modification strategies, where we're reinforcing when a student is exhibiting behaviors that we want to see, and then we're going to help them to adjust their behavior if need be as well. And those are some of those strategies that you might see in supplementary aids and services.
So after you do what the teacher does with SDI, or specially designed instruction, and then the supplementary aids and services that are going to help support, then we look at, is there anything else for the whole child that we need to consider? So is it safe for a school bus ride? Or if I'm not able to hold myself up and I might need special needs transportation, where there's a safety vest that will hold me in order to access the bus in order to get to school. Physical therapy, looking at fine motor in that area, and occupational therapy of looking at strength and vitality, and really thinking about mobility options, as well as work-related items that are going to help me medically or access. And then the in-school counseling could school psychologist or a mental health practitioner, of really thinking about maybe anxiety or attention, grief, whatever it may be, that the expert is in school that would help, that I might need this also. And then deaf, and I work with Kentucky School for the Deaf. And so, does a child need ASL, American Sign Language, or an interpreter to help support access for a student who is not able to access other means of communication or instruction.
And it may be, and is often the case, that a student doesn't need related services at all. So don't, if that's the case for your student, don't be stressed about that. It just may be that they don't need that. Okay.
Right. So it's there if you need it, and if not, that would be what you would help the conversation lead in that way. And then the least restrictive environment, we always think about general education first. We think about, can the student be successful and have a good experience in the learning environment in a general education classroom? Sometimes it could be where, let's say Stacy is the general education teacher and I'm the special education teacher. It could be in a co-teaching environment where we both are in the classroom and helping support, where we're able to have smaller groups and more teacher-student ratio opportunities in the general classroom. If it's too much and it's going to take more significant instruction, maybe that's not the best scenario, and so we look at a resource or a special class. And in the law, those are the same numbers. It's typically up to 8 or 10 students. Sometimes it might have another adult in the classroom, or an instructional assistant or a paraeducator, but it's a smaller class focused on the curriculum, but more intensive instruction in a smaller setting. If that doesn't meet the needs of, then you would have the conversation of looking at a special school that is earmarked to help support maybe more behavior or health needs, specialized. I'll look at Kentucky School for the Blind is a state school for visual impairment. About half of those students are half day in Jefferson County Public Schools and then half day at Kentucky School for the Blind. I may have an eye issue where I'm visually impaired, but it's genetic, and I may be in a situation where I'm going to continue to lose my sight. So I might need to go there just for the Braille instruction. And then I can access the school in Jefferson County for the other things. So that's how you kind of put together a puzzle of where the child can access the most information that's going to help them. Home instruction, and Stacy, I haven't had as much experience with home instruction, but it would be a conversation that is everybody would have at the meeting around, is home based on health or other reasons, working through that, and then instruction in hospital or institutions where it may be more significant need. We might have the school system may have a memorandum of agreement with Brooklawn or Peace Hospital or something like that. There's lots of variables involved with that, but it's not just one place that fits every child. So you have a continuum to say, where can the child enter in and be successful? And we want to make sure that that setting is going to help support that success.
And you're going to look at that every single time that ARC meets. You're going to look at the least restrictive environment. So, and a lot of kids just need a combination of different things. Maybe they need the resource setting for English or reading for ELA. So they might need that if they have a specific learning disability in the area of reading, they might need that resource setting for English language arts. But then I'm a rock star in math, so I don't need that. I can go out in a regular class for that. So it truly is individualized based on the student need. Krista talked about this earlier, but accommodations can be provided if they're consistently a part of that student's routine instruction. We can't hang on to those and have those in your pocket and pull them out in time to take the state assessment or the ACT or what have you. We can't just put that in your pocket and hang out onto that. It needs to be consistently part of that student's routine instruction. Accommodations are going to be connected to all the other parts of the IEP, the present levels, those measurable goals, whatever specifically or specially designed instruction the student is receiving, and the supplemental aids and services. So again, those accommodations could look like extended time, a reader, and they're going to differentiate between whether that's a human reader or a reader with technology, a scribe, a calculator, paraphrasing. All of those are examples of accommodations that might be provided on an assessment.
And I always think about this too, is you never want the accommodations to override instruction. So you always want to think about accommodations are good if the child is needed, but it never takes the place of instruction. So you would want a non-example would be like, let's say I had a student come to me at 9th grade and they were sitting, everybody was reading a little bit and then they're going to turn and talk. They're going to think about it, they're going to turn, and then they're going to have a conversation about what they read. And the student just, let's say they just sat there and I went over and it's like, if I had to say, well, what's going on? They're like, I'm waiting for my reader. Well, what I found out is this particular child had a reader all through middle school. But what had happened is the instruction had gone to the wayside and the accommodations had taken over. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about how this child can be as independent as possible and making sure that instruction is effective. And if they also need accommodation, that's also something that can be discussed as well.
The service delivery section of the IEP, again, is going to talk about those details of where and when and who is going to be involved in delivering those services. How long is it going to last? For example, if my student receives speech therapy, how often and how long are those sessions going to be? If they have mental health practitioner as a related service, how often and how long? If I'm getting co-teaching, again, the same. Where's that going to happen within that co-teach setting? I'm going to receive my math instruction in a co-teach setting. I'm going to receive my ELA in a resource room. We're going to talk about that's daily, 55-minute period, for example. So very specific information about service provision.
So once you decide all those things, what's going and how often, then that's where all the teachers and others would look at, and even the student can collect and graph their progress. And then as a team, professional learning teams that could work, or you and the teaching team could look and say, is this child making progress? Or they're making progress, but not at the rate we need in order to bridge that gap. We want to make sure that it's enough duration or intensity that's going to make a difference in the student's success. So if they are not making any progress, and Stacy talked about this a little bit, is then I need to relook at my instruction as a teacher and say, what, this is not working, it's not going at the rate. I need to suggest or look into other resources that are going to be more helpful for the student, and so that we can work towards those goals. So I use that data. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dots right there. So as you can see, there's a little break where it goes down. Well, maybe on at the end of the week, it goes, that first dot is Friday, but then over the weekend, it went down. And so I know that gap was right there, but it didn't take long to catch up, and he even, or she went higher in that. And so as you can see, there's growth there, a little bit of bump, but then with good effective instruction, continue to grow and make success for the goal that's occurring. And the teacher would be thinking, okay, what's my next instructional move if the child is not progressing? What can I do differently to help support as I monitor the progress? So I would collect and graph, and I would also have the student talk about graph and have them look at their goals and instructional decisions and ask them if it's working or if it's not, and what might we do informally when we're working together. I don't have to wait for that next January 24th. I can also, call the parent. We can work, the parent, you as a parent can call, and we can set up a meeting to talk about it. It can be a meeting to look at that, or it could just look at progress. So it's a partnership.
Absolutely. So again, we've hit on this a bunch tonight. So at a minimum, the ARC committee is going to convene annually. That is a minimum.
And then the reevaluation, you would continue to look at how the child is progressing. We want to make sure that we have the most up-to-date assessments. A lot of growth occurs in 3 years. What else might we want to focus on, or do we have any other concerns, or has the instruction worked so well that maybe the child has had enough instruction and related service, et cetera, that there's not a need for it. But reevaluation tells everyone where the child is. It gives another point of reference of where we're headed as a team to think about what we can occur. So the reevaluation, they would do some behavior observations. They would look at instruction, behavior, kind of the whole child, and you would be a part of that conversation and growth of what you're seeing that worked in the first 3 years for the next opportunity.